Welcome to Season 6 of the RAG podcast. Now, for those of you who don't know, the RAG stands for Recruitment Agency Growth, and this show has been around since early 2019. And every week, we are obsessed with finding out how the world's most successful and innovative recruitment agencies and their founders have got to where they are today. In Season 6, alongside the founder's story and the inside information of that business, I also want to focus on the reality of today's economy. There is so much noise about this inevitable recession that we find ourselves in right now. And where it's going to go, is it really having an impact on the recruitment sector? Are they seeing any change in job flow? Are they seeing any change in candidate control or activity? What is going on? I want to find out. So every single week, I want to forget the propaganda, forget the noise. I'm going to speak to a real life recruitment owner and find out what is going on in their business. I will bring it to you every single Wednesday from 12 o'clock across multiple platforms. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast. On this week's show, I am super excited to be joined once again by Hannah Donaldson. Hannah is the CEO and founder of Meet, a global life sciences services company, recruitment and talent organization that I interviewed originally in June 2021. At that point, Hannah had a business that was 135 staff after 12 years. She'd just launched new initiatives such as academy hiring models, and she predicted significant growth on the horizon. Now, on reflection of the episode, I remember thinking a lot of the questions I asked Hannah didn't really get to the nitty-gritty of the detail, and her growth plans were significant and strategic, but there was no information. The reason for that was because she was going through an MBO transaction at the time and couldn't say anything really. So in September last year, 21, a year ago to this day, the business announced that they'd been acquired. Well, they'd had an investment, a 50% investment by NorthEdge, a mid-market private equity business, who backed the buyout of Hannah and the original founding team to take the business to the next level. So the whole process began in 2018 and then really took over Hannah's life in that year of 2021 up until the closing of the transaction. We're talking about 60-hour weeks, working through the night, whilst building a business and letting others run the business with a year-old baby and a pandemic. The amount of things she went through in that year are incredible. At the point of transaction, the business had already grown to 160 heads. So she'd grown the business by 25 people in between the June and the September. And then now, a year on, they're at 230 people. So they've grown by 100 people since I spoke to her 16 months ago. And they have the plan to grow with another 200 or so hires over the next 3 to 5 years with the investment partner. So in this episode, I wanted to break down, firstly, why there was a need for the MBO and for the PE backing, but also what that actually looked like from a transaction perspective and how she managed to navigate that difficult, most complex situation. And then what does that mean in reality? Once it's been realized, what's the last year been like? How have things changed? So many recruitment leaders worry about investors and, going from a privately owned business to having other people involved in decisions and wanting to, having to report numbers and effectively, feeling like maybe you lose control. Hannah's had an amazing experience with NorthEdge and talks at length about the relationship and the fact that, they've got it right so far, and that she felt like the due diligence process meant that she picked the right partner, which was ultimately the most important thing. So this episode is going to give you a lot of practical information and insight into such a big MBO, but also the reality of working with PE firms as a result of a transaction like this. I loved it. Hannah is one of the most well-spoken, articulate, polished CEOs you could meet in the recruitment market globally. She's incredible. And I think it's going to inspire and educate so many people that I'm so excited to release the episode. So without further ado, Hannah, welcome back to the RAG podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. June 2021 to September 2022. How quick has that gone?
I know, I know. Weird, isn't it? In some ways feels like a lifetime away, and in some ways it feels like it was just yesterday. It's great, but time is flying for sure.
Mental. I literally, I know everyone says it, but I do think this is the fastest year of my life. Like, this is the
Yeah,
one that I blink and it's just,
yeah.
are we in September and Q4 next month? I mean,
Yeah, I do
ma-
think we're just bouncing from like major event to major
yeah,
event as well at the moment, be
yeah,
it obviously coming through COVID, and then we've had a war to consider from a, business and macro perspective, and more recently the Queen dying,
oh,
and there's just all of these sort of major events. It just feels like bouncing from one to another.
I know that's like on a like global or
Hmm.
national
Yeah,
scale.
yeah,
Personally, I've had like in the last 12 since we spoke, I've left Manchester, moved to Sheffield. I've moved in
yeah,
with 2 kids. I've got engaged. I've been a best
yeah.
man last week at my business partner's wedding. I'm getting married next month.
Jeez.
I'm buying a house. I'm selling a house. I just think the amount of things going on. The funny thing is,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't say it's funny, but last week I'm doing the best man speech for my business partner, right? And
Mhm.
we'd heard about the Queen in the day that she wasn't
Mhm.
very well. But again, no one really thought too much about it. We're all in.
Mm.
Halfway through my speech, I just noticed everyone's on their phone. Everyone. And I'm like,
You
I'm like,
thought that you'd lost the
have I just
crowd.
bored everyone? And then the news came halfway through my speech
Uh,
that she
oh
died. So as I
God.
come off, first thing I come off the
Okay.
stage, everyone was like, Queen's dead, Queen's dead. I was like, oh
Yeah.
Christ. And that it's interesting because Emma was born on the 21st of April, 1986, which is 60 years after she was born
Right,
for the day.
right.
And then she died on his wedding day. I'm like, there's something,
Yeah.
a little connection
Bizarre.
going
Some sort of connection
on.
going on there.
Mad. But you are right. The world has gone mad and it feels like the thing time's passing. But you know, you've had also a very
Mm.
interesting, what do you call
Yeah.
it? 16 months,
Yeah.
16, 17 months,
Yeah.
something. So Hannah, before we get into it,
Mhm.
for anyone who didn't listen to part one and doesn't know who you are, just
Yeah.
recap who you are right now, like the overview of you and the business.
Okay, so I'm Hannah Donaldson. I'm in the process of changing my name. I actually got married before COVID,
Right.
but never changed my name, and it's now honestly just getting silly.
What will your new
The
name be?
mascot Haig.
Hey.
So Hannah Haig, yeah. So I sort of live with that name in my personal
Yeah,
life. I've
yeah.
never changed it in work. As I'll go on talk about, we completed a transaction, so everything in the back office of the business is in my married name. Everything in the front office is in my first. I turn up to hotels and flights, and it's just
Oh, wow.
ridiculous trying to
Get it
masquerade as
changed.
two people. So we're just in the process of formally changing everything. But yeah, so that's the quick potted history on my name. But I I founded Meet back in 2009. So
Mhm.
started my career within the S3 group. What I now know to be sort of entrepreneurial spirit, and I've only recently become sort of a little bit more comfortable with that word
Yeah.
entrepreneur. But I think what I now know as that definitely demonstrated itself in the period of time that I was in S3 and founded Meet in 2009, which is a people focused, purpose focused, so end market, life sciences centric recruitment business. Fast forward many years, I took that business to the Americas, so 2015, and we scaled in Europe before moving out to the States.
Mhm.
I did a 6-month stint or what I thought was going to be a 6-month stint in New York. 6 years later, I was
Wow.
brought back
I
for
fell in love with that
various
place as
tax
well, right?
reasons. Yeah, kicking and screaming. But now I am CEO of Meet. We are still a people centric, life sciences focused recruitment organization. We're private equity backed. We completed on a transaction last year. So just after
September,
we
wasn't it?
went through this process, yet
Mhm.
September the 3rd. So we've just passed our sort of year anniversary of that transaction. And that's what I do now.
Wow. So when we last spoke, your
Yeah.
business was 135 people.
Uh-huh.
Okay. The headlines of the episode were 12 years in, 135 staff. You just evolved an academy model. So you talked
Yeah.
about 14 new academy graduates
Hmm.
kicking off that month. Um, and you talked about a strategic growth plan. You were
Mm.
very, very broken down,
Yeah.
cards on the to the chest.
I find it awkward listen to it back now because there's just so much I couldn't say.
Yeah, and
I
I
was
didn't realize,
thick in that
and obviously I didn't
transaction
know.
process.
I just
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't realize. I thought it was a great chat, but looking back now, I'm like, yeah, there was. I kept trying to get out of you, like, so where are you heading? It was very,
Mm,
just very high level. So the news broke. in September that
Mhm.
you was it NorthEdge were the
Yep.
private equity firm that invested in you guys
Yeah.
and backed the MBO with you
Mhm.
personally. Um, and they announced in the press release, this was only 3-4 months later after our chat,
Mhm.
that you were 160 people. So you'd grown
Yeah.
by 25 in that short window. Now
Yeah.
you're at 230 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Like
been
you
some
see,
really
just that
significant
alone,
growth.
just if you just we could speak about that alone for the next
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's so much gone into this that's it's incredible. We talk about
Yeah.
growth on the show. That is serious, serious
Yeah.
growth in 12
And
months.
actually, I think it's quite interesting if you break down those numbers and I look at the growth this year, so through
Yeah,
2022,
yeah.
a big chunk of that growth has been in what we call the hub. And I think I talked about that last time. So we have scaled the fee earner group within the business across all of our different locations. But actually, the headcount that we've got in our back office, so that's finance, people, learning and development, marketing, data insights, a success function. So anything that basically is not frontline sales fee earning activities, that's grown by nearly 100% as well. So a
Wow.
lot of that investment this year has actually gone into the sort of grounding of the business to
And
create an
how many
environment.
people is that in the 230? How many people would
About
that be?
yeah, it's about 40, 45,
Right.
50 now,
Yeah.
of people, majority based in London, certainly from a finance perspective. We've
Mhm.
actually got, one person who's potentially moving out to the States from the financial side, but spread right across all of the different offices now, again, from a sort of operations perspective as well.
20% then of headcount roughly is sat in the back office,
Yeah.
which is quite, I think that's a good level.
Yeah.
There's
For a
one
long, long time, we were very lean, and I think we were lean, and I may have mentioned this last time, is that, I'm a pretty operationally minded CEO. I
yeah,
think there can be, to me, there's kind of two breeds of people. There's people who are just super entrepreneurial and are totally ideas centric and
sell,
actually don't necessarily translate that back into sort of operationally running a business. Whereas I would like to say I have some of that skill in terms of being able to create vision and scale and create a plan in terms of longer term sustainability and strategy of the business. But I actually have also been able to kind of execute that from an operational perspective
yeah.
as well. But we definitely got to a point where I couldn't be and shouldn't be responsible for those sort of more operational responsibilities. So we've created an absolutely brilliant team of hub experts. Since we last spoke, we've hired Glenn, who was
Yeah.
consulting with us to lead insight, success, and marketing. Claire, again, she was covering a mat leave. She leads our L&D process or L&D structure globally. We've grown some really amazing organic talent there. So there's been some really, really significant changes in that back office or hub, as we like to call it.
Amazing. I think, yeah, I know some businesses that are larger in headcount with like 5 people in the back
Yeah,
office.
yeah, it's
And it
bloody
is
chaos.
crazy. I think, as the CEO of a much smaller business, but what we now have 40 people, I'm definitely the more of the ideas guy
Yeah,
than what I mean, my business partner, Amma, is, even though he's COO, we're kinda like co-CEOs.
yeah,
He's definitely more aligned to being like you, I think.
yeah,
We kind of someone said to me, like, I'll be outside the window shouting out and he'll be holding the belt, making sure I don't
yeah.
fall. Good way of
You
looking at
need
that.
that. You need
Yeah,
that
I
for
definitely
sure.
need that. I definitely need
Yeah,
that. I'm wasted in other areas.
yeah.
So I'd like to go back a little bit,
Mhm.
and because we couldn't talk about this last time,
Yeah,
right? So where did this whole idea of a management buyout come from? Like,
yeah.
take us to what point in the journey did, because I don't know, I can only compare to my experience, and I remember
Mhm.
when I was nowhere near your level, didn't own the business, I was just a manager, right? But I remember being on a journey with the previous organization, and we were like two train tracks completely in parallel
Mhm.
for 4 years, maybe 3 to 4 years, and then it just things started to veer, and I couldn't pinpoint a moment, but
Yeah,
for some reason, what I wanted from my life and career and what they wanted from me didn't sound the same,
yeah.
and it gradually got worse. Like, it just got, and that's when
Mhm.
obviously, I parted ways with the business, and I
Mhm.
see that consistently in other organizations. So take us back to that journey for you, and how did it come to fruition?
Yeah. So I think most people that found or recruitment organizations, there's sort of a well-known theory that you should always have an exit in mind
Yeah.
and be working towards that exit, as opposed to necessarily just carrying on and seeing what happens. There is that theory, and that's in many sort of high growth businesses. I think when we started the business, there was always a discussion in terms of how we as the founders would realize our investment at some point in the future. And I think the reality is that the recruitment industry is amazing for being able to deliver really high growth businesses. I feel really lucky that I found this industry, because actually, if you look at lots of other career paths that friends and peers have gone down, your ability to actually be able to start, scale, and benefits from a business is so much more within the recruitment industry. So
Yeah.
there was always a sort of loose plan, I
And was it
suppose,
just
that we were
you and Paul, or
scaling for a reason.
was it just you and
Alistair
Paul, or
as
was it
well. So there's
Alistair
three
as
of us that started the
well?
business. So um, uh, again, we had that plan. We had a plan as to, at some point, the likelihood is that we would all or some want to realize the investment in the business moving forwards.
Yeah.
Towards the sort of latter part of that, 12-year journey, when I spoke to you, I think it started to become increasingly clear that my vision and ambition for the business moving forwards, in terms of actually longer term scale and taking market share and creating a best in class employer brand, was just different to Paul's, who was the
Yeah.
majority shareholder.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it was right and wrong. It's
No,
just
no.
different,
Yeah.
and having different sort of views and ambitions. So, really from 2018, I started working on the premise that an MBO was going to be the most likely outcome for the business. So, management buyout, meaning that myself and my leadership team would take the business forward through continued period of growth, and that Paul would exit.
And realize it.
And yeah, do something different, and go on a different life's experience, really. So really from 2018, I would say
Yeah.
that was when we sort of crystallized that plan and started working towards it.
We'll go into the detail in a minute, but what I'm really fascinated by is like, why. So,
Yeah,
and I'm just talking to you here. Like, why do you see yourself running a business like this
yeah.
for the future? Because like you say, I don't get the feeling you've put an exit on for
Mm-mm.
yourself. It's just,
No,
no, you're
no.
young, you've got energy. Like,
Yeah,
but what is it for you that? Why didn't you feel like, actually, I'm 10, 12 years down the line, I could realize the benefit and go
yeah.
and do something else? Like, tell us from your perspective, what
Um,
excites you about staying in here?
so I suppose the first thing is that I've got a really clear vision from a personal perspective in terms of what I want to achieve. So,
Right.
as an individual, I want to have a fulfilling, professionally satisfying career. Um, which is not at the cost of my family. It's quite a
Yeah.
clear vision in terms of what I want to achieve. Um, I have utmost respect for people that are stay-at-home mums and do that. That's just not how I'm wired. It's not
Mm.
what I want to do and how I see my life moving forwards. But ultimately, I wanted to make sure that I created an environment and a career path where I could have some semblance of balance between bringing up a young family and also, creating a career path and a business journey that was really satisfying. And it became clear to me that actually running the business was super satisfying. It's great in many ways to be a privately owned business that you are in total control of. And I think control is a really big subject in terms of, entrepreneurs and founders looking at what their options are from a realization perspective. So I really enjoyed that, but actually became increasingly curious on what else there was from a business perspective that I could learn and experience. So, the again, going back to that 2018 period, there sort of was ongoing discussions in terms of what that MBO could look like. And it became quite clear to me that, selling to a trade buyer, somebody that would acquire the business 100%, I would go on some sort of earn out, felt like for me, I was selling out too soon. I love this business. I think that it's really high potential. I think it's really high performance. It doesn't mean that we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we've created a business in a really buoyant market that doesn't have huge amounts of cyclicality, where we think a lot about the employer value proposition and the employer brand. And I believed that we were really scratching the surface in terms of what's possible for the business, but also what the experience could be for me as chief exec as well. So that's what drove my ambition to really look into creating an MBO that meant that I could continue to realize my investment, but with not an end date in mind, really.
It is fascinating that after 12 years, you still love it. Like, you
Yeah.
love the business, you love the job, you love the
It's
challenge.
so different, though. It's so different. Even in the last year since I've spoken to you, my job as chief exec of a private equity backed high growth recruitment business is in totally different to what my job was 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when I was starting to run that MBO process. What I do on a day to day basis, the people I engage with, the conversations that I have, it's a real ongoing learning opportunity. So, yes, it's the same, but actually it's not the same
Yeah,
at all. It's
yeah.
totally different as the business evolves.
Right. So 2018, then you start to look at the reality of
Yeah.
taking it. What did you do? How did you do it?
So I needed to build a board that essentially I needed to surround myself with people that can make this happen. That was
Right.
the sort of simplest way of looking at it. So in 2018, Steve, who's our CFO, joined the business. I'm pretty sure it was late 2018. He joined as a finance director. He'd work at the staff group business beforehand, and has been instrumental in creating that sort of MBO process moving forwards. I've learned loads from him. We're a really great team in terms of running the business. And one thing I would say to any founder or entrepreneur that wants to go down a transaction or a process, you have to have a really brilliant finance person by
Mm,
your side, because I think I've got many strengths, but I'm certainly not an accountant.
mhm,
And you need somebody who can educate, support, and be able to have those conversations that, as chief exec, you're just not capable of
yeah,
having,
yeah.
whilst also accepting that you need to upskill really quickly during that period. I put a board advisor into the business as well. So, that was somebody who essentially supported that transition from a non exec perspective of an owner-led business into a business that was ready for private equity investment and
Someone who'd been through that
ability to be
journey
able to
before.
change. Yeah, his background was private equity,
Mm,
so he'd actually been involved in the S3 group from an M&A perspective historically as well. He was awesome for what we needed in that moment of time to sort of change the business so that private equity or other investors could look in and would see the things that they need to see in terms of giving them comfort and the stability and the growth opportunity within the business as well. In 2020, I brought Anton into the business. So he's long-standing recruitment leader, real expertise in contract growth, which is a big, significant sort of strategic value driver for us and continues to be moving forwards. So I sort of created a board that allowed me, put the people around me that meant that it was a reality to be able to go down that MBO private equity investment process, and grew the SLT predominantly organically. So, they are people that run regions, high growth businesses, multi-million dollar and pound businesses now, and create that really united exec and senior leadership team, which again, if you look at what private equity look like, that's what they do. They're backing management teams really. So I needed to make sure I had the best possible management team around me in order to create the reality of this MBO.
So that's a 3-year process.
Yeah,
Yeah. So what
3 year
are
and a
the
baby
yeah,
and
oh, wow.
COVID.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and COVID, don't
A
forget that.
few things going on there,
Oh,
but
yeah,
yeah.
just knock out a global pandemic at the same time. Um, so again, you talk about the people around you.
Yeah.
What what are the what did the business have to change over
Hmm.
that 3 years? Like, what would again, you can't go into everything, but what do PE firms want to see that perhaps wasn't
Yeah.
as easily accessible or evident in 2018? Like, what are the goals or milestones you and the team had to achieve, change you had to make to get to that point that you were ready for it?
I think operational stability is important.
Right.
A business that's wholly dependent on one person will always make any investor, never mind whether it's private equity or venture capital or even a trade buyer moving forwards. You have to have a business that's not wholly dependent on one person
Yeah.
from a business development or a client counsel or an operational perspective. So I think infrastructure where you could actually talk to real stability in the business was really
Did you
important.
and were you in a position at the beginning of that journey where perhaps there was a few people that maybe were key man risks
Yeah,
or
yeah. I mean, when we started the process, I had to continually answer questions as to whether this was the Hannah show. And that was the language that they used really. Like, is it the Hannah show? Although I was actually committing to the journey moving forward, uh, obviously people wanted to have confidence that if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, the business wouldn't dissolve,
yeah.
because life things happen. And creating, like I said, private equity in particular, or mid-market private equity, just really want to back management teams. And yes, as chief exec, you're front and center of that process, but it can't start and stop with you, because
What things
the
were you
key man
doing in
risk is you.
2018? What things were you doing in 2018 that now no longer other people do that show that you've made that evolution progression
Yeah.
to being less involved in everything?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a standing joke, really. But when we first went to America, I was basically like the financial controller for our
Right.
American business. I mean, what a
Right.
joke. I was doing payroll,
Oh
I was
wow.
chasing debt, I was the liaison between the banks, I was looking at solutions in terms of factoring and invoice discounting. You know, I was that American business start
You were
to
yeah.
finish. So,
And you were probably
actually,
hiring recruiters and oversight of what they like the leadership
totally,
team were doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, key point of contact for large scale clients, lots of client meetings and visits. I was really operationally running the business with the support of a very great team.
Mm.
It certainly wasn't on my own,
No.
but I was involved and central to pretty much all large scale decisions that went on across the business. And that was where really bringing Steve into the business was a big one, because I simply wasn't qualified to be a financial controller for our American business. I look back on that and I think, as again, an entrepreneur, a word that I've become a little bit more comfortable with, you do what you've got to do, but often you're not the right person for the job. And I certainly wasn't the right person to ensure that we had financial practices and a financial institution within the business that was bulletproof in terms of, the stuff that drives business fundamentally, which is cash collection and risk and compliance and that side of things. So, I suppose it was about putting the expertise in the business. And then as chief exec, you become over it all. So you're aware of what's happening, but you're not necessarily the person that is driving that at every turn. I think that's the big shift.
How many people report to you or did report to
Now,
you at the point of transaction?
uh, so a point of transaction, it was, but not dissimilar to where it is at the moment,
Yeah.
essentially. So our board is Steve and Anton. We have investment directors from private equity on there as well. So they are my direct
And
reporting
what does
line.
Steve do again? Is he finance?
CFO. Yeah, yeah,
CFO. Yeah.
yeah.
And
So they're
Anton is
my
COO. Is
um,
it?
so he's global MD at the
Global MD.
moment, but
Right.
essentially his role is everything. He takes total responsibility and accountability of everything revenue centric
Right.
within the business. So they are my direct reporting lines from a board perspective, and then we have a sort of matrix reporting line across the board, both from in terms of our hub leaders, but also our regional teams as well, the SLT there.
And how many people are in that on that layer?
So 4 on the revenue side, Alistair, Nick, Laith, and Mike. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the hub side,
Right.
people, finance, insight, success and marketing,
Yeah.
L&D and operations.
Wow. So you brought in an advisor.
Yeah.
You got really close to a CFO. How did then the process start to evolve when it comes to actually engaging with private equity firms?
So the first start of it is actually appointing corporate finance.
Right.
So corporate the advisor that you referenced there was a sort of board advisor.
Mm.
So he was on a freelance basis working
Yeah.
with the business, working with me in terms of just evolving it moving forwards. But what corporate finance do is create a process in terms of pure play investment. So we spoke to a number of different corporate finance firms and providers, uh, people who have a reputation within both the recruitment industry, but also this expertise in life sciences. And we
Mhm.
really needed to blend the two, given that in many ways, I think one of the things that made the process for us as competitive as it was, and the stars aligned definitely from a timing perspective here, is that in many ways we were seen as a life sciences service provider from an
Right.
investment perspective, rather than a pure play recruitment business. And I think that's one of the big values of
Why
being
is that?
non-generalist. Life science is super buoyant at that period of time. We were just coming out of a pandemic. There were other industries, stating the obvious, aviation,
Yeah.
events, etc., which were really struggling during that period. And the investment in life sciences was sky high. So actually, private equity, VC were all really interested in getting into life sciences, even if it was a service provider to the industry as well. And because our brand and our business is really purpose driven, we were able to kind of leverage that and position ourselves, as I say, as a life sciences service
Do you offer
provider with this
any
expertise and
services
talent.
additional to recruitment, whether it be contingent, RPO, whatever? Is there anything outside of human capital that you do
So it's
offer it?
all human capital centric, I would say. I mean, I hate that's such a private
Yeah.
equity word, and it basically means people. But
Yeah.
um, talent and people is central to what we do. But actually, the type of service lines are becoming more varied. So it's interesting. We've just launched a new website, and historically, the sort of language on that is that we do perm contract and executive search, whereas that's really archaic now. Now it's very much about the type of service. So a couple of things that you mentioned there: MSP, RPO, interim. So we've diversified in terms of actually the type of service that we offer, as opposed to typical perm contract executive search.
Right. Okay. But you see more firms now looking at things like employer brand services.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
are you looking at that as well and thinking about like
Not
talent
actively at
solutions?
not
Yeah.
actively at the moment.
Yeah.
One of my overarching vision for the business as we move forward is very much about delivering a business that is a service provider for the life sciences business. And I think that will always be centered in talent, but
Mm.
those type of sort of value added services are definitely part of the roadmap moving forwards as we diversify the service offerings that we
Right.
have in our repertoire.
So once you went through corporate finance, how did that then evolve into the next phase?
So the process in the potted history of a process. So we ran a proper process. We didn't, get an inbound inquiry and just focus but down that route.
Yeah.
We really wanted to take the business to market. And the reason that we wanted to take the business to market is I wanted to get a real sense of what life could be like post investment. One of the challenges within MBO is that you've got shareholders or stakeholders that have probably got different mentalities and different
Mm.
visions. I of course wanted the business to be valued fairly. I wanted it to be representative of the success that we'd have over the years. But actually, the most important thing for me and the team was what life would be like after that transaction, both in terms of relationship with a potential investor, but also what those returns could be further down the line as well. So, I wanted to run a process to get a really broad view of what that could look like. And again, I think, in many ways the stars aligned that it was a really competitive process. We had lots of interest in the business. We had I'd maybe did about 15 conversations with
Wow.
interested private equity partners at the beginning. In the first round, we had 6 offers. We then brought that down to 4. We had 4 final offers at the end of the process, of which we then made the decision that we
How
felt
many
that
meetings
NorthEdge.
do you have with a
Oh,
North?
it's relentless.
Is it?
Yeah, it's absolutely relentless. I make a joke that I think going through a transaction is a little bit like giving birth. At the time, you're like, I'm never doing this again.
No.
It's absolutely hideous. It's too much. It's impossible. I can't do it. And then just afterwards, you can look back at it and think, oh, it was empowering, and
Yeah,
it
do
was
that again.
all of these things. It's a bit like that running a process. From when I spoke to you really in that June period, we were peak in the process at that point. And that continued right the way through the summer, and I was working like an absolute dog, like I never have, like I
Right.
never ever have. So and there's lots to do. The due diligence process is grueling, not because they're finding holes in the business. They just want to
Yeah.
understand what it's about. The interface with
Was there ever
advisors,
a question you got where you thought, "Where did that come?" Like, was there
yeah,
anything that
all the time,
yeah.
all
Could
the
you give us an
time.
example of like a something they wanted to know that you're like, "Where did that come from?"
Oh, some of it was all about, they were really interested in what our market share was, and it's like it's just impossible to
Yeah.
deduce.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can pay, because if you think there's so many parts of the process as well. So you're engaging with corporate finance. The director who worked at the corporate finance firm that I worked with has become, I joked throughout the process that I was upgrading him to a friend, and I
Yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
a great guy, and we spoke every single day for 6 months, often at length, and had very heated, challenging conversations sometimes. So, but you're working with huge amount of lawyers from both sides, both private equity and also your sort of sell side.
Mm.
You're working with strategy houses that are doing some of the due diligence work. You're working with tax advisors. It is a enormous process, and the fees are phenomenal. Like,
Mm.
they just start to be numbers on a spreadsheet as opposed to actually amounts of money,
Yeah,
because they just it's so huge.
yeah.
It's a big process. It's a serious process. So
How did you find
um,
running the business at the same time? Did that like what
so it
did you
kind of goes
find
back to what I was talking about before, is that it's so important you've got a brilliant team, because with the best will in the world, you can't.
no.
I believe you can't do both. And we actually traded incredibly well during that period. So we were looking at figures February to February. We then gave an update in the June, which was significant growth from an EBITDA level.
Mm.
And actually, when we finished the year, we were almost double what we thought we were going to deliver at that half point in the year.
Wow.
So the business traded incredibly during that period. And that's just thanks to my leadership team, because I wasn't heavily involved in the performance of the business during that period of time, because Steve and I were very much at the coal face of getting this transaction across the line.
I'm interrupting today's episode to bring you a message from our sponsor, Vincere. Vincere are the all-in-one recruitment platform for the most innovative recruitment agencies on the planet. And they've put together a free CRM buyer's guide for you to read, because so many recruitment leaders are looking to upgrade CRMs, but before you sign the contract, be sure to read the terms at least twice. There's so many common traps that you need to watch out for. So not understanding the pricing model is one that always comes up. Discounts limited to only the first year of a contract length is something that companies will throw. What are monthly contracts all about? Could this mean flexibility for the vendor to raise the price in the future? And how is your data hosted? Where is it? Is it anything outside your country? And could it mean compliance and legal issues for you down the line? So you will see the web address to get that right next to this episode. Wherever you're watching this episode, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's Apple, Spotify, YouTube, just look below. You'll see the link, click the link and get that free guide. You will not regret learning all of these hacks before making your decision and locking yourself into a new contract with a new supplier. Wow. Was there ever a moment you thought it might not happen?
Uh-huh. Many. Yeah. Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you deal with it personally? Like, how do you deal
And do
with
you
it?
know what? I talked about this. I was involved in a panel with the American Staffing Association recently, and I talked I think before I said that, one of the great things about being part of a business that is evolving is that the experience is totally different and you're learning something new. But I went from having zero understanding and exposure of the finance world, really. I didn't know the legalities, I didn't know the operational considerations, I didn't understand the dynamics of tax across the US and the UK and Germany. So the learning curve on the way through is absolutely unbelievable. And I've never experienced imposter syndrome like it. It was because I actually working with a coach, I had to really reframe how I saw it because you're surrounded by Oxbridge grads, super intelligent, high expertise advisors that you are surrounded by that are looking to you to make decisions in terms of how you evolve that process and how you drive it forward to ultimately reach that transaction. And I had to really change my mindset on it because at times I was like, why are they asking me?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know the dynamics. I'm the least qualified person in the room. But actually, I really shifted some mindset working with my coach there, which was, you know, I've engaged these people who are definitely considerably higher IQ than me, have been in these environments a million times before, but I've engaged them to educate me in whatever way they need to so that I can make decisions. And instead of feeling that imposter syndrome of they are another level to me,
Like, what's
actually
an
I
example of a
changed that.
decision? Like, give me an example of a decision you have to make that you
Just in terms
instantly
of So
felt
it's sort
like,
of legality structures in terms of, when you essentially we've totally changed ownership of the
yeah,
business, and therefore there are multiple ways that all of the stakeholders have to interact
mm,
in order to make sure that the business is protected fundamentally. So,
yeah,
a lot of it was just in terms of how things were structured, how we created a share structure moving forward that was both fair and right for management, but delivered the returns for our investors as well. So a lot of it is sort of structural
right,
complexities that the only person that can make the decision is you as chief exec, but you're coming from a period of learning where however many weeks or months ago you had no idea what you were
yeah,
going into
that
or
makes sense.
understanding. Yeah.
So, so what were you looking for? You've mentioned it was as much important to you about obviously getting a good price and
Hmm.
all of that, but actually it was really important about the vision. What were what were the kind of things you wrote down to say
Yeah.
this is the partner for us? What were you looking for when you went out
Yeah.
to speak to multiple options?
I think it's a really, really good point because when you start looking into private equity, which is the route that I went, you hear absolute horror stories in terms of them over leveraging the business, stripping out management teams, all of the sort of old school 1980s banking reputation that exists within the sector and the industry. And there's definitely some truth in it. There's no question that private equity as an institution are an investment institution. They are responsible for delivering returns to their investors and therefore do a lot of work to make sure the businesses they are investing in are ones that can scale and that can grow and therefore will create value creation. So there's not total untruths with it, but my experience, certainly of mid-market private equity, is that it's much more relationship centric than the reputation precedes it really. So what I wanted is to create a future facing board that were aligned from a vision perspective, wanted the same things. Remembering what I said before is that the board that we had beforehand, and this again is not a criticism at all, just had different
Yeah, yeah,
views
yeah.
and ambitions. So actually moving into an environment where everybody was pushing in the same direction in terms of the opportunity in front of us was really important to me. It sounds really basic, but I just needed them to be good human beings.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Anton, one day, and I said the reality of the situation as we go into this transaction is that it's likely that, or I would like to think that myself and my husband would have another baby during the period of transaction. And here I am nearly 7 months pregnant.
Wow.
So that's become a reality. And also my mum was really unwell, and she is stable at the moment, but at some point that will not be the case. And we will go through, that process that many other people go through, which is daunting, but what happens in life, So I needed to make sure that I was surrounding myself just by good people that were like-minded, human, understood the dynamics of business, both from a financial and fiscal performance perspective, but actually just from a people perspective
How do
as
you figure
well.
that out though? Like, because
Spent loads of time with them.
is that what it is?
Yeah, ultimately. And I think, there were a couple of private equity companies that we were talking to that on paper looked great, but they weren't forthcoming with the information in terms of actually who would be sitting on my board. Whereas if I looked at the way that NorthEdge handled the process, the people that I was in touch with from the first meeting right the way through that process are now people that sit in a board with me on a monthly basis that I call up to bounce ideas off and have discussions and updates with. So, partly is just experience of spending time with them, but partly it's about the sort of ethos of the business and their acceptance of the ethos of the business. My goal in a partner was that the vision would be aligned, that we want to deliver growth and value creation, but not at the cost of the culture. So, I don't want to lead a bums on seats recruitment organization. It's not who I am. It's not the uh, way I get professional satisfaction. But I have a responsibility to deliver growth, not only for me and my family, but also for the wider shareholders as well. So I think it was really talking through that vision and assessing the responses and the understanding and the questions that you got that gave me confidence that there were people that were just like-minded in terms of where we were taking the business moving forwards.
Amazing. So, where paint the picture of where you were when it finally completed. Tell us the story around that. What was that like?
So I don't know why I've not spoken to anybody. So this year I've been involved in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year process, which is essentially a networking opportunity for you to engage with fellow founders, entrepreneurs, business people that are taking their businesses on varying different journeys. And through the network that I've created there, it is always the case that these things go on and on and on. My sister's a lawyer as well, and I remember her saying to me, she was like, "You won't close on that day." So essentially, we thought we were ready to go on the Thursday morning. We went to the corporate finance office, myself and Steve and Will, who we were working with there. We were essentially waiting for the lawyers to do the do, to get all of the documentation ready. Because of COVID, it was on DocuSign. Back in the day, it used to be rooms of paper that you walk around and sign, whereas everything that we did was on DocuSign as well. We were going all day on the Thursday. We were briefed that we would just go through the night on the Thursday night, and at some point we would complete. I then had a conversation with the partner of the law firm on the other side, who were like late on the Thursday evening. It's quite a funny story actually, because Will, who worked at our corporate finance business, and Steve, our CFO, had just had their second double espresso when we were told that there was no point staying awake and that we should go to bed and start again tomorrow. I was there with my peppermint tea, very grateful. So then we went to bed on the Thursday night, got back up about 5 o'clock in the morning on the Friday, and then again went all day on the Friday. And it's just going backwards and forwards between the sides, really. The lawyers are doing their due, the advisors are checking that all of the information is per the spreadsheets that have been put together in terms of how that process should flow. And then we actually closed at about 9 o'clock on Friday night. We were in Rocker on Charlotte Street.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. It
Yeah.
was honestly amazing. So I was so emotional.
Just
I
the
was
three of you?
so emotional. So it was Nella, our EA, who was
Oh, wow.
witnessing
Yeah, Nella's been
everything.
booking these
Yeah,
meetings.
yeah, she's a
Go on,
hero.
Nella.
James, who's our board advisor, and then actually there were quite a few of the business that were around on lunch clubs and stuff that
You
came
just
to
met
come
up.
and join us. So
Oh,
it
wow.
was a mega experience. For me, it was a culmination of a year's work. Like I said, I was really, really emotional. I felt absolutely confident that we'd got the right partner, and it was the sort of first time that myself and the shareholders within the business at that period of time had realized significant benefit from the investment that we had in the business moving forward. So yeah, it was amazing. It was a brilliant experience. And I think more importantly, again, that's the childbirth thing. I'm able to say it was a brilliant experience now, but at the time I was like, oh God, I need to go to bed. I'm dead.
Yeah.
But the thing that I'm most proud about it is that I can sit here a year on and say that the experience has been exactly what I hoped. We've appointed a new chair who's unbelievable. Really, he's non-recruitment background, an incredible businessman, doesn't miss a trick, very interesting in terms of his input, and that's been a great learning experience for me. My relationship with our investors is brilliant. They are interesting, soft touch when we need them to be, involved when we don't, so it's just been a really brilliant
What is it like? Like
experience.
what is the reality of the beyond that day? Do you have any
Yeah.
time off or anything after that? Did you go and have an holiday?
So do you know what? We were going to go on holiday, but for one reason or another, bear in mind, during that process, my husband had literally run our home,
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
my life, looked after our child. He
How
he
old you? How
is a
old your first
hero in
child at
this
that
as
point?
well. So she's 2.5 now. So
Right.
she's
So
3 in
she's
November. So she was little.
a baby. Yeah.
He it was a team effort for absolutely sure. I wouldn't say I wasn't present because it was really important for me to continue to be involved in family life, but you're naturally distracted a lot of the time. And I was working super long hours,
Were you
towards
always
the
in
end.
London a lot as well? And
Yeah, I did do some stuff in London, but it was thick in COVID, really.
right.
So a lot of the time we were at home, which was highs and lows.
Yeah.
There was benefits to it, but there was no boundaries. So I would wake at 2 o'clock in the morning and start work,
Oh
because I
wow.
couldn't sleep. So,
Um,
things that I look back on as probably deeply unhealthy, as well as, something there. So, I can't remember what the question was. What
Beyond
were we
the
saying?
point was, did you go on holiday?
Oh yeah, so we didn't. We were going to go on holiday. We didn't in the end. I did have some time off. I just hung out with,
Yeah.
with my daughter and my husband, and saw family and various different celebrations and stuff like that. So, and then we actually went away in the new year. So
Right.
yeah, we did a week away then.
So you said before that your job as a chief exec now is totally different.
Hmm.
Like, in what way? Let's break that down a little bit.
So it's not. I probably. It's not totally different in that there aren't. Similarities. I see my job as delivering a vision that allows the business to create value without detrimentally affecting the culture. That's the simple way of looking at what I do. So, I have responsibilities now to our investors, obviously. So, as I said, it's pretty soft touch, but the creation of the board pack is a different
Is that every month
structure
you have
than it
to do
was
that?
historically. Yeah, we have a board meeting monthly. They're
Mm.
brilliant meetings. They're really
Is
forward
that all in
thinking.
person for a day or so?
Predominantly in person, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're sort of 2-3 hours or something like that. So that that's a part of the process. I'm increasingly doing sort of more work from a potential acquisition perspective as well. So one of the benefits of being private equity backed is that you have deeper pockets, I suppose. So, I'm looking at how we could potentially complement the business moving forwards from a M&A perspective, and that's quite a big chunk of my time. It's really exciting. I am responsible for sort of ongoing wider considerations. So as an example, we've just done, because it was the year anniversary from the transaction, we've just done another tranche of shareholding allocations within the business. So a group of about 20, 25 people that are now also shareholders of the business moving forwards. So, essentially have been given some equity out of a predefined pot that was agreed as part of the transaction, which means that as we go on this journey of value creation, they will benefit from the success of the business, outside of their paycheck, essentially. And that's, you've got to work with lawyers and advisors and tax experts and everybody in order to be able to bring that to a reality. So, again, there's sort of those bigger ticket items that didn't exist before that, now are much more prevalent in what I do.
And you've grown, as we said, by like 95 heads in that time. And you mentioned, you've doubled your back office, but there's still a lot of fee earners gone into the business there. So what's been the strategy? You mentioned this academy model. How have you evolved the headcount across the salespeople in the business?
So that has continued, that academy model, and our people and learning and development function work really closely together to make sure that people are being brought into the business in that kind of cohort model, essentially, and that's across all locations. We are hiring not only at that graduate level, but we're also bringing people into the business that, have got varied experience that would again complement what we're doing overall. And I think we really believe that we're a great home for experienced, tenured recruiters now who are looking for an opportunity to join a business that is genuinely on a really exciting path in terms of value creation and therefore, like I said before, returns outside of paycheck as well. So we're doing quite a lot of work in, as I said, complementing the workforce that we've got so that we have both a internally meritocratic structure, but also the ability to be able to scale and grow the business with people with slightly different skill sets. So spending quite a lot of time on that as well.
How are you finding that because that is the biggest challenge, right? That's every recruitment agency wants those great people from competitors, but really great people are usually being treated well. So how have you
totally.
seen
It is really challenging. There is no question that it's difficult to achieve. And actually, I would include that sort of graduate model in there as well. We have pretty high standards. I see my role as creating a high value business where the culture isn't detrimentally affected. And therefore, we have to really look into our hiring processes and making sure that we're creating communities of people that are aligned in terms of values, but also, diverse from a background perspective. So, it is challenging. I think one of the benefits that we have as an organization is that, we are in the life sciences industry, hence the branding behind me in the meeting room. There's never been a better time to be part of this industry from a cyclicality perspective. We've had quite a few people that have maybe joined us from different backgrounds, NHS, energy, that type of stuff, that are really enjoying the opportunity to work in the end market in which we're focused. So I think that's a USP for the business as well.
Incredibly high growth, high margin. It's also really, I think it's rewarding. It's a rewarding sector. Like you're doing things to benefit humans over the long
100%.
term.
The sort of tagline of the business that we work with now is that life sciences affects us all. And that's the truth of it. Everybody in the world is interested in health and wellness in some capacity. And actually understanding what our clients do, be it the sort of tech side of it or, the pure play drug development, is totally fascinating. So there is a stimulus there, which, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other organizations, but I think is a big USP for people joining and genuinely wanting to be part of an industry where, they make a difference. We are building the teams for the future of global health. That's the part that we play in the jigsaw puzzle of things that have become much, much more real, particularly having lived through a pandemic. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big USP for us as well. And we've just got to keep on working on our employer value proposition, the training and development that we offer to people that have got, experience as a recruiter that want to go down a business development or a leadership path, and just continue to make an environment where, people can flourish and bring their whole selves to work. And that's what I'm committed to deliver for people joining the business as well.
When you've said it on numerous occasions that the growth of the business won't be at the cost of the culture. So, how would you describe the culture like, and what's the DNA that you look for in people, whether they be graduates or experienced people?
So one of the things that has been interesting as being part of a private equity backed business is there's been much more noise and focus around ESG. So looking at factors like environmental, social, governance. And naturally, as a people business, we've always thought a lot about D&I in
Yeah,
terms
yeah,
of the service that we provide to our client base, the inclusion strategies that we have internally to make sure that we're a business where, as I referenced just before, people can truly bring their whole selves to work. But actually, ESG is a really big part of value creation in businesses now. Running businesses where there is a sustainability lens on it is increasingly important, and is moving away from being a box ticking exercise to actually something that's really crucial from a culture perspective as well. So, I think, we, not dissimilar to many, high growth recruitment organizations, we look for people that are highly driven, highly motivated, want to create a fulfilling career that is high performance and high reward. That's the sort of core, focus there. But actually, we're really interested in people that want to be part of something bigger than that. So involved in our culture communities that we have right the way through the business, involved in some of the business that we do from a green perspective. We're looking a lot at net zero at the moment and how we can improve our emissions as a business that contribute to the greater good of just the environment and the work that needs to go into the environment for future generations. So I think it's that blend of, we want of course, the high performance, high reward, high motivation, career centric traits that
yeah.
make people really successful, but actually also what we give is an environment where people can bring their whole selves to work and be involved in things that historically maybe have been perceived as extracurricular,
Yeah.
but actually now are just part of creating a really high value organization and high value business.
I love it. What have you done around the working practices post COVID? So when we met, we were kind of out of COVID, then we went back into COVID at the
Yeah,
end of last year.
yeah,
There was still. I mean, I truly feel like we've moved on.
yeah, I agree.
Again, I don't want to speak too soon because the
Yeah,
winter's approaching.
yeah.
It seems like we've got other challenges at the minute. What do you feel in terms of um, keeping your staff motivated, making
Yeah,
sure that people have that, like say, bring your whole self?
yeah.
How do you operate from a working practice? Where do people live and sit and work? What's the kind of DNA of that?
So all our offices are open.
Right.
So we've got San Francisco, San Diego, New York, London, and Berlin. So all of those offices are open 100% of the time. Where we've sort of landed, I would say, across all locations is this sort of 3-day, 2-day split. I am a huge supporter of flexibility and against presenteeism as part of a business culture. I, however, really value community. And I think one of the benefits of being in a high growth organization is that you can surround yourself with really ambitious, like-minded people that create energy and make you feel part of something. So we do have employees who work 100% remotely across all different locations in the world. But I would say on average, we've kind of landed on this 3-day, 2-day model. And there's flexibility based on people's individual needs and the role that they're doing as well. So, and look, I think COVID was a nightmare in lots of ways. My business traded incredibly well during the period, and I am really, really grateful for that, because I don't think I certainly didn't feel the pain from a commercial perspective that lots of other people did. But I think one thing that's come out of it is an acceptance across business that people can be productive working from home. It's not something that should be looked down on.
No.
And I look at my personal experience and thinking, I returned back to work after a maternity leave in a much more flexible working environment than I probably left. And I can see that that's really positively benefited my family, and it's not been at the cost of the business. So,
Yeah.
I think that's where, and we will continue that way. I won't lead the business back into a 5-day a week, got to be at your desk at 8:30, 5:30 model. I don't think there's huge value in that. But we also will be a business that values community and being part of something, because I look at my 20s and my 30s, and I think of what value I got from the people I surrounded myself with. And I want the same for the people joining our business now as well.
Yeah, for sure. I've got 2 final points I want to make. So the first is around the economic reality. So this
Yeah.
season, I don't want this to be all about recession, but I do want to talk about the fact that, we are sat here now at the back end of Q3, approaching Q4. And there's a hell of a lot of noise about a recession,
Yeah.
and the fact that, we are officially in a recession. I don't even know if we are at this stage, but what are you honestly seeing as the chief exec when you look at your numbers, when you look at the business, UK and internationally? What is anything changing? Give us some of the kind of headlines that you see from a
Yeah.
performance perspective,
Mhm.
and do you see anything changing in the near future?
There is absolutely no doubt, I believe, that there is a normalization going on in end markets right across the board.
Yeah,
And I use that word normalization very intentionally, because we have worked, in my opinion, in the most buoyant market where the war for talent has been unprecedented over the last 18 months, 2 years.
Mm.
It couldn't continue. And in many ways, it shouldn't continue, because there will be longer term downsides to that level of talent and war for talent there as well. So we are seeing more caution than we've seen over the last 18 months. By caution, I mean just a little bit more considered in terms of recruitment processes. We've still got a high proportion of our clients that are hiring. We've got still building a client base of people that are new to us, that are also, being invested in and considerably growing. So there's no turn off, but I think it would be ill-informed to say that there isn't this sort of caution, correction, normalization that's going on in the markets at the moment. I think that's also been paralleled with, particularly here in the UK, and I think it's softening now, the sort of anxiety and nervousness around cost of living, which has
yeah.
obviously come out of the energy prices in the war as
Mm.
well. And I think a combination of the two can create an awful lot of noise that maybe isn't necessarily needed
Yeah.
from a response perspective as well, and I
Well,
think there's both sides.
one thing that I spoke to someone the other day, and they talked about their permanent. This is a technology recruitment firm, not as big as yours, but of size. And their UK perm is 50% down in terms of
Yep.
vacancies, right? So my question is, what do you do in that situation when normalization. So you've got to
Yeah.
compare it to 2019, really. You
Mhm.
can't compare it to
Mhm.
2021 because that was bonkers.
Mhm.
But what do you do when your recruiters get used to a certain level of
Mhm.
performance? When everyone gets used to a certain level of jobs, certain level of deals, like there's million. I seen a business, Oscar Associates, yesterday promoting £5 million billers, and two of them are in their first year in recruitment. Like, I've never heard
Mm.
that in my life, right?
No, mad.
So, what happens when the market changes and it becomes
Mhm.
normal? It's still
Yeah.
not. We're not talking about recession and depths of despair, but we're talking
Mhm.
about human beings and business
Mhm.
leaders and consultants that are so used to this level of activity. How do you manage that expectation
Mm.
change? As an and also as a business leader, you're getting used to seeing your numbers. If you've got a PE firm, especially check in
Mhm.
as well, like what happens there?
It is the ultimate challenge at the moment, isn't it? If you think the numbers that you talked about before in terms of a growth trajectory that
Mm,
we've been on, therefore, what it means is that a high percentage of the people that work in our business have only ever worked in that incredibly buoyant
yeah,
market.
yeah,
So this is going to feel like a downturn. That's just the facts of the situation. I think really all you can do, and what we're really focusing on at the moment, is controlling the controllables. We can't change the macro conditions. We can't change energy prices. We can't change the investment backdrop into biotech moving forwards. But what we can do is look into how we interact with our clients, with our candidates, and look at the recruitment process that we're working to, and really focus on where we can control the controllables from a process perspective. So we've started to create project teams that work right across the business globally, that are going to look at sort of certain key factors that will bring together thinking, not just on your team or in your office, but actually in terms of the larger global business, to try and create a new education on how we need to react and behave with a forward facing mentality. And I think the key thing in any recruitment business, and this is what I've been very vocal about with our leadership teams, is this cannot and should not feel like a punishment to
mm,
people. If we are creating teams and environments where people are comparing their performance in a super, super buoyant market to a market that is more normalized, and the management or the leadership of the business is creating negative communication about those trends, then you're going to create big cultural challenges, I think. So this is about us saying, we didn't do anything wrong before, we didn't do anything particularly right before, we just behaved in the way that suited those market conditions at that
yeah.
moment in time, and it delivered significant growth and profitability. We're now in a slightly different world, and we've got to behave differently. And it's not a punishment from what's gone before, it's just a different way of
So
thinking
at
and
the
different
top,
way of
have
working.
you got to realign your expectations at the top then of what good looks like? And
Yeah, and we had that
yeah,
in line anyway. I've not budgeted for the same level of growth this year as I did last,
but I reckon
because
businesses have. I reckon
aha, but
so many leaders have gone, well, if you did 350 each last year or whatever,
yeah.
like we want to see 450 this year.
And look, budgeting is incredibly difficult at the moment. What is normal? What
Yeah,
is good? What can we expect in terms of contribution per head, within the business? It's tough. It's one of the biggest challenge, I think, of being, an exec within a recruitment organization at the moment, is where should we set our aspirations? So, I think there's an understanding in our business that the level of growth that we've seen over the last 18 months isn't going to be replicated year in, year out moving forwards. But we are equally an ambitious business that is focused on value creation, and the journey to continue to improve the business is one that we're committed to. So it's finding that balance between the two,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. And there's going to be a lot of people panicking and changing. Like, like you say, that negative energy will come out in a lot of
Yeah.
businesses. It's a
Yeah.
shame, but it will.
Hmm.
And then my final question then. So where are you heading now? So you're at 230 people.
Hmm.
You're a year into the new new business. What's the future look like? Let's say if we were whether we have another interview in a year or so, we'll see. But
Yeah.
let's say we did 2 years down the line. What would you predict could be the position you'll be in then?
So we've still got this significant opportunity in order to be able to grow in the sectors that we are in at the moment. So, if you look at the client base opportunity in the DAC region, or you look at the client base opportunity on the east or the west coast or across Europe, we're still scratching the surface in terms of what's possible. So from my perspective, it's about continually to organically grow the business so that we take advantage of the growth of the end markets that we work in as well. As I said before, I'm not driven by headcount numbers from a
No.
vanity perspective. Ultimately, what I want to make sure is that we continue to grow, but do it in a way that's considered and means that we've got enough investment in leadership so that individuals aren't exposed and
Yeah.
that professional development is core to who we are and what we do as well. As I said before, we've now got a sort of organic plan and a potential outside of organic plan opportunity within M&A as
M&A.
well. And I think I would really like to achieve a successful integration that would mean that we can diversify the business moving forwards as well. And I think
Would
that's
that be
something that's
likely in the
really
next 2
available.
years, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Now the
Um,
process has got rose-tinted glasses now, so you wanna do it, yeah.
Yeah. But we are ahead of plan from an investment perspective.
Mhm.
Private equity cycles of investment are typically 3 to 5 years. Therefore we're a year down.
Mm.
So, if you look at that sort of generic expectation in terms of what happens in private equity, I'm really, I want to continue on this. Path to take market share, deliver value to our stakeholders, management included, really crucially, management included. And that includes the new tranche of shareholders that we just allocated over the last couple of weeks. Deliver value and also create an environment where people feel included and rewarded as well. And then for me personally, it's this balance that I've got to strike at all times, which is, enjoy the journey, create professional satisfaction and challenge and reward in the way that I'm wired from a personal growth perspective, but do it so that it's not at the cost of my family.
Mm.
So I've got another maternity leave
I know,
coming
yeah.
up. So
How
it's
long do you think you'd have?
navigating
Would
that.
you have some time? Do you
I
think you'll
don't
have
know.
time off completely
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Yeah.
I will take some time off. I think it's important. I've got a great team. I don't worry about the business in my absence. It takes a bit of planning and making sure that there is clarity and communication in terms of who's responsible to what for what. But yeah, the beginning of next year I'm going to try and invest in my family as much as possible
Wow.
and navigate becoming a mum of two. So
Wow.
see
Well,
how it goes.
I wish you the best of luck. I mean, I'm
Thank
I'm
you.
now the stepdad of 2, and, hopefully
Give me
we'll
some
be
tips.
we'd love to have our own child next year, so it could be 3, 2 dogs, new house. It's
Jeez.
all go. It's all
That is
go.
all go.
It
Yeah,
is.
that is all
And
go.
the biggest I mean, observing 2 for a year is I mean, it's amazing that they interact together and they've got each other,
Mm.
and it is,
Mm,
it's
mm,
incredible, but
mm.
you
I
always
think it's
find.
interesting the decision to have a second baby because a lot of it was my daughter's called Ivy. A lot of it was about Ivy. It was like I
Mm,
I love my sister. Marcus's was one of four.
mm,
Siblings are a really important
yeah,
part of who we are in our life, and I wanted to give that to Ivy as well. But then of course you're pregnant. And you're like, how will she be, and will she feel
yeah.
left out? And what's the period of time when I've
It's
got
a
a
good age, I
newborn
think, what,
like?
2.5
3
years
years.
in 3
Yeah,
years. Yeah,
3 years.
I had a brother who was 2 years older than me and a brother 3 years younger than me, and I think the
Yeah,
age that was a good age gap. I think
yeah.
just watching the 2 though, it's hilarious how, like, you'll always find when one's high, one's low. Like, as soon as one of them's in a bad place, it could be a ridiculous reason, the other one will suddenly perk up, and they're brilliant. They become an angel instantly when they. So like,
Ah,
you rarely get them both like
yeah.
in the same like motion. It's hilarious, but it is. I mean, it's amazing. It's truly rewarding. But Hannah, we've done nearly an hour and 15 minutes. So
Yeah,
I want
long
to say
time.
thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you
I mean,
too.
this was another level of episode, I believe. The first one was brilliant. Got to know you. We heard a really in-depth story of the 12 years, but this kind of explains a lot. So
Yeah,
thanks for
a
giving
bit
us
less
that.
cloak and dagger, I
I think
hope.
so. I think so. I imagine there'll still be people that will want to talk to you and have
Mhm.
questions, and I hope if they reach out to you via LinkedIn, that
100%.
you'll take that time. And
Yeah,
I would love to have you back on in the future. This show isn't going anywhere, like you say. I mean, this isn't my business. I have the business, but this is
yeah,
part of the business where there's no end date of this. I love it so much. I'd love
yeah.
to see where you're going to go in the future. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. Okay,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Sean. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, as always, for listening to today's show. I truly, truly hope that you got value from it. That's the only reason I take time every week, is to ensure that my audience, future and existing recruitment owners, are learning from each other to make this industry that I love so much stronger. Today's episode was brought to you by Hoxo Media. I am the CEO and founder of Hoxo Media, and we are the world's leading content marketing and personal branding agency for recruitment businesses specifically. So we are working with over 200 agencies and 2,000 recruiters right now, both managing the brands, producing content, building written, video, podcast content for niche recruitment agencies all over the world, as well as coaching at a desk level individual recruiters in your businesses how to be better on LinkedIn. That's how to brand themselves. That's how to produce content. That's how to use the opportunity on LinkedIn to get traffic to their profiles and turn that into business. We're coaching people all over the world every single day. If any of that sounds of interest, please do visit www.hoxomedia.com or drop me, Sean Anderson, a personal message on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to you. I'll see you soon.